we are looking at the current rise in the cost of living. And I'm joined now by my guest, who is Dr. Aliyu Ilias. He's an economic analyst. Thank you, Doctor, for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Doctor, I will want to begin by, speaking regarding the current economic indicators. And like I stated before, the cost of living rising, the standard of living, not so much has been done regarding that. Unemployment, unfortunately, rising due to, the cost of cost of production across businesses. And, we did hear from the TUC, the NLC, the ACCI, the LCCI, as well as other organizations and unions talking about, cutting down on the number of staff. So unemployment on one hand rising, inflationary figures and consumer price index rising. All of these figures put together, pointing in one direction. And in my opinion, not the most beautiful of pictures. But let's hear from you now. How would you assess the current state of the Nigerian economy?
Right, it's quite a challenging time for Nigerians because things have gone very, very high, unlike before. Before you have to have an idea of what happened next, but now you don't even know what happens to you next. Perhaps the savings you have must have exhausted. So when this now happens, it becomes a serious problem. But I think since our governments are not living outside Nigeria, I was thinking they will have the experience and the feelings of what we're actually going through. Is quite a pretty difficult time for Nigerians now because the purchasing power has been eroded with all manners of indices. We could see that even common transportation people cannot afford. You could see people on the street walking from one place to the other, not because there is no vehicle, but because people cannot afford to pay for vehicle, transportation rather.
A very unfortunate situation, like you have stated. But one of our commenters on social media, rose or pointed at a very valid point. That is, the commencement of operations by Dangote Refinery, and just immediately we are hit, with the rise in the price of PMS. But I would like for you to help us juxtapose these two events. One would have expected, the opposite, but there we have, the opposite happening. But can you, give us some sort of explanation as to
that? Quite interesting. For me, I never expect Dangote Refinery to come to reduce the price of PMS. I rather think Dangote will have its own advantage, maybe in terms of creating employment. We are having industrialized economy through Dangote. We're also having a balance in forex. If these are but in terms of reduction of price in PMS, Dangote is a businessman and he wants to play in global market. You remember that actually, as at now, the cost of PMS globally per liter is around 1,117, and Dangote wants to sell at that level because he wants to make profit. You also see that Dangote made mention that he cannot sell unless he discuss with Federal Executive Council and NNPC. This simply shows that there's a gap he's expecting federal government to come and actually close. That means he wants to sell at the obtainable price global. You will not blame him. He's a businessman and he wants to make profit.
But how would you appraise, how this entire situation has been handled? Yesterday there were, rumors that the federal government is asking for Dangote Refinery to determine the price. But Dangote is saying, no, I would not be doing that. But the entire situation, the back and forth, and talking also regarding the current increase in the price of PMS and all that has played out within Nigeria's energy sector recently, and how that is impacting not only on the cost of living, but also the cost of production and businesses, MSMEs generally speaking. How would you say, from your own view, from the lens of an economist, how has this been handled?
Right. For me, I think NNPC is not being sincere with Nigerians. You recall before now, they told us that weather is a problem of the scarcity. At a point, they said it's supply chain problem. At the time, they said it's infrastructural problem. But later came out and said it is because of the shortfall they could not pay, which is about $6 billion US dollars. So, and that really caused the problems. And beyond that, I do not think it is a business of NNPCL to determine the price of PMS. It should have been the business of NMDPRA. So I think we have a structural problem that needs to be addressed as well. We don't want situation whereby NNPC will always come out and say this is the price of commodity in the place of NMDP. I think there should be structural correction in that area.
But let's go now on a short break. When we return, the conversation continues, and my guest, who is Dr. Aliyu Ilias, is still on standby to stay. And you are still watching Business Daily, coming to you live on Trust TV. And just before the break, we started a conversation on today's edition of the program, and we are looking on the rising cost of living, which has been, exacerbated primarily recently by, the increase in the cost of PMS. But there has been efforts by the federal government, trying to, douse the tensions and reduce the shocks that Nigerians might feel due to the current inflationary pressures. And one of those is the commencement of, the sale of about 30,000 metric tons of milled rice to Nigerians at a subsidized rate of 40,000 naira per 50 kg bag of rice. And for you to benefit from that, according to the Minister of Agriculture, you are expected to present your national identification number, that is your NIN. But I still have Dr. Aliyu Ilias here with me on the program. Thank you again, Doctor, for coming on the program as usual.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I will want to, begin by hearing your assessment of the federal government's decision to sell 30,000 metric tons of milled rice to Nigerians at a subsidized rate. According to the minister, he said this is expected to douse the shocks that Nigerians are expecting. Like they say, full belly is, how is it said? When you have a full belly, then you are happy. If your stomach is full, at least then you have less to worry about. But let's hear from you now. How would you assess this act by the federal government?
Well, it is quite funny because the federal government is thinking all our problem is rice. So transportation, rice. If you want to pay school fees, rice. So I don't know how rice has become solution to all these problems. For me, I think for them to say they want to bring sucor, that shows that they've recognized that there is a problem. And problem has to do with hunger. But the fact is that purchasing power is a problem here. Because if you actually give people food, how many people do you want to give? Now, there's a condition behind it. You must, if you're a civil servant, you must be on IPPIS. I know some people are fighting to even be out of IPPIS. You also said they must also have names. So the government is now very conscious of making people follow the rules. Why the government itself is not actually following the rules. Now, for me, bringing up rice, you may think it's just too temporary to be a solution. Because if you give me a 50, if I bought, even buying, not even free. So if I buy at 40,000 naira and I have to eat it maybe in 2 months, so what happened after? That's the problem. And we're talking about general purchasing power problem. So the problem of Nigerians, I can tell you, is not rice. Then if you really eat rice alone, won't you buy condiment or what have you to even cook this rice? Won't you have to buy gas? Do you know how much gas is now? Gas, 1 kg is now 1,400, 1,500. So how do they want you to afford that? Transportation to your work, how do you afford that? So I think Nigerian problem is not about rice. We need a better economy that will help our purchasing power.
I mean, you have spoken to whether or not this is going to be sustainable. And even if it is, Nigerians have access to rice now. What happens after 2 months or 3 months? But let us talk regarding, the implementation and the effectiveness of this. We already have touched on that briefly. But in the past, there has been, the case of government officials being accused of, hoarding bags of rice that were supposed to be sold or given out to Nigerians. So what are your thoughts on the use of the NIN, the NIN numbers, as a form of identification before, giving out these bags of rice? Do you think it would in any way, strengthen the effectiveness and the implementation of this process?
Well, for them to bring that condition, I think it's not a bad condition to make sure that people, but the thing is, does it stop people selling the rice? I can tell you, let me give you a good example. A particular state in Nigeria gave out fertilizer for farmers to actually use for farming. Do you know what happened? They sold that fertilizer. You know why? They have some immediate needs. So if you give people rice, maybe they must bring NIN, they try to follow the rule. Let's assume that rule is followed. People that will collect rice from you, I can tell you they will also go and sell the rice. because they need beyond that rice. You know, if you give them a bag, they can say, let me sell half bag of rice to get some money to actually cook and do other things that are actually in there. So for them giving that condition is not a prerequisite that it is not be sold. And I can also tell you, political associates will benefit from it more, because people will take it to their locality. They want to go to their environment, want to see them that they are doing good. So it's the normal thing in Nigeria. And that's why we said, stop giving all this palliative, all this reduction in prices. Let us have a better living. Let my salary be okay. Purchasing, but let me be able to do what I need to do. Not that you now condition me that I must buy rice at a particular rate. They may even have that rice, nobody will go there. Or people will go there with the intention of buying it and resell it. It's just normal thing that is happening in Nigeria.
You know, when you talked about being sufficient enough and not having to depend on palliatives, what crossed my mind is the saying that, don't give me fish, rather teach me how to fish.
Correct.
But I would like for us to, talk regarding the more sustainable approaches that you will consider, especially looking at it from the economic point of view, for the government to address the rising cost of living, rather than giving handouts and palliatives to Nigerians at this point?
We only need two things that is very important to us now. Energy security. That's the first thing. If you notice, the fuel price has gone up, has affected virtually everything, because it will affect transport. Anything that affects transportation affects school. I can tell you, most schools are now sending back to the parent that former school fees is not obtainable again, because of this increments, that there is a difference already. The cost of rent will change. The cost of everything has to change. So we have problem of energy security. I think government should find a way to actually cushion that effect by rescinding this new increment. It's even funny in Nigeria now. Do you know what? We are now begging government again, please bring it back to 670 and 700. We are even seeing 670 and 700 as a solution to us. Meanwhile, it's not correct at all. We cannot have oil in our country, and you'll be comparing us to a country like Cameroon that does not have oil. That's number one. Number two is security. If we actually have a good security, by now we should have food flood everywhere. Nevertheless, that we still have challenge of food supply chain. And like I said, the federal government is not being sincere to what they are saying. You are telling us that, okay, you bring up CNG, that CNG would have pushing the effect of petroleum. And up to now, we have CNG problem. I can tell you, even people that have converted their vehicle to CNG now, they are now on queue again to buy CNG, to refill their CNG. Do you see the double problem? So I've not seen this government solving one problem in totality without issues. So it's like, you are not even giving us anything, but the little we are managing, you are taking it away from us. So they have eroded our purchasing power. Inflation is very, very high. Cost of food is very, very high. Insecurity are there, biting us hard. I think this government needs to go back to the drawing board and have a good solution to the Nigerian economy. If not, you can see what happened in Kwara State. People just suddenly, and it was quite funny. During the end bad governance, Kwara State did not partake in the protest. But you could see that this one happened spontaneously. In fact, the Keke said they are not going anywhere because they cannot continue to buy. And people are trekking from one week to the other. Even before now, it has become a culture and part of us that some people now sleep 3 days at work, 3 days at home. Because of what? Because of transportation. So the purchasing power is the major problem. It's not the issue of giving rice. Purchasing power, let it be okay.
Well, you have spoken regarding energy security, but I'd like for you to emphasize on the ripple effect of not, solving that particular situation.
Right. When we say energy security, we start with, let's even look at petroleum and look at electricity. You see, every businesses, every operation, every home need energy. So that energy, you need it for production. MSME are out of business now simply because they cannot even afford to even pay common electricity bill, because if you are in band A, you know what I'm talking about. And when you need to buy petroleum to power your generator, you cannot afford it. So the GDP of the country is going to have issue, the purchasing power is going to have issue, and people will lose a lot of business. I can tell you, most businesses are closing down day by day because of energy costs. And it's a driver that every economy, every country that wants development must make sure they create solution in that aspect. And our own is quite pathetic. We even have everything in abundance. We still have hydro. We have water that we can use to power electricity. We have crude oil now that we can even say our refinery, if they are working, we have 4 refineries. If they are working, we can say, okay, don't sell to Nigerians at the global price because we have oil and we wouldn't spend money on transportation. Okay, let's sell at the particular. Nothing bad Nigerian is being sold. I mean, if all petroleum is being sold to Nigeria at 250, 300 at most globally. You know, we can do that. Okay, look at Saudi Aramco. Look at other countries that have. They are not suffering like this, but because of successive administration, right from Basojo, have not done anything in terms of refinery. That's why we are suffering this. So I think they should walk into energy security and make sure they solve that for Nigeria to move forward.
You have spoken regarding, you know, the importance of energy and how that generally affects literally almost all sectors and how that will impact on the GDP, that is the gross domestic
Absolutely.
product. But let's hear your outlook for at least the consumer prices in the coming month. What is your prediction for CPI in the coming months?
Well, the fact is that if you look at the last report by NBS, you see that they say inflation is coming down to an extent. But the fact is that if you look at the indices itself, it's just temporal. Because you need, like I always said, up till now, we do not have a short-term plan for economy, medium-term plan, long-term from this president and his administration. And that's a serious problem because I see that Shetima actually had meeting with the Economic Council and what have you. They must do something significant because if you look at it now, the MPR is still continue to rise. These are problems until all these indicators comes down. And what will make them to come down is for Nigerians to have more purchasing power, for we to have a better GDP, you know, for economic outlook to be okay. Because even investors are skeptical now because you want to invest where the economy is stable, you want to invest where there is adequate security, you want to invest where the business environment is conducive for you to grow. And that's why you see that in a place of we are attracting, people are actually going. When our president went to China, you know, he was trying to canvas for business. This is when he went to Qatar to come. Have we get any business from Qatar? Because all these people, they want to see enabling environment. Even not for China interests in Africa, China personal interest to create market in Africa, they wouldn't have come. So unless you have something you want to take from Africa, you wouldn't come and invest. As individual, I am skeptical of putting my money into business because I don't know what will happen next in the Nigerian economy. So it's a very tough one to really predict a positive outlook for Nigeria economy.
You've touched briefly on, you know, policy and policy direction. You made mention of the MPR, that is the monetary policy rate, which according to the CBN governor is expected, you know, with time, you know, cause some kind of deflation with CPI, that is Consumer Price Index, according to the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. But on one hand, we've seen that, you know, affect the business space negatively, and on the other hand, we still have some unfavorable policies that have not, you know, been the most beneficial to businesses. But I'd like for you to speak regarding how we can, you know, create that balance between implementing or putting out policies, and on the other hand, not jeopardizing the welfare, you know, and the comfort of the Nigerian people.
If you look at this central bank governor, he has tried a lot of policy. I can tell you over 40 framework, policy direction. He has been trying everything. But for me, I think he has not gotten what we actually want. And it's pretty easy. Now, he is thinking of bringing inflation down at all costs. If you look at him, and he does not mind sacrificing Nigerian growth. Because if you look at him now, he doesn't mind if the MPR continue to go up and inflation is coming down.
But is that a formula, an economic formula?
Well, it's a kind of hawkish approach. It's an approach, but when you apply an approach over time and you see the result, you should have to change. So for me, it should allow growth to take the lead, because when growth comes, a lot of things start, you know, to get balanced. But from there, you can easily come and control the inflation. But if you don't want growth to grow, you want to bring inflation down, it's it's contradicting. And perhaps you must not look at what is obtainable in America to use it in Nigeria. You must look at peculiarity of Nigerian problem and pump money and encourage especially manufacturing sector and MSME to grow. 85% of Nigerians are in MSME because our major employment is in farm I can tell you 50% of Nigeria are still there. Find a way to support these people to actually grow. Not that you say no, because you want inflation to come down at all costs, you will sacrifice growth. So sacrificing growth is a problem we are facing now.
Sacrificing economic growth.
Economic growth
is the problem that Nigeria
now, yes.
is facing.
Right.
But I will now like for us to touch on, coping mechanisms. You saw the comment I went through whilst I read out social media comments. Quite depressing, I should say. But I mean, this is a job that we do, and very unfortunate circumstances there, being narrated by Nigerians. But are there coping mechanisms that Nigerians can inculcate in this time, seeing the rising cost of living? So what strategies can individuals, can households implement towards, the tough economic climate?
It's pretty difficult to even advise Nigerians because, we are in it together. Before now, we think you need to go for what you need, not for what you want. Right? But even what you need now is becoming a problem. You need shelter, you need food. These are concrete things that we need. Even food is becoming a problem, because for you to afford food, I can tell you 70% of our income is going to food consumption. Look at a household of 5, and you are saying the basic salary is is 70,000, which is $40. How do you want them to even cope? Let alone, do other things. So your basic need is even being tampered upon, because you cannot even go. Someone just said it now that he has not gone to work for 5 days, for a week. So if you don't go to work, how will you get survivor? That means for the means to even go to work is becoming a problem. That's very pretty difficult. I'm sure he must have been a private business owner, because if he's working for somebody and you didn't go work for a week, you've just called for a sack. So that's how difficult it is. You can see in London, people said they are trekking, trekking long. I can tell you, people call me and say they trek a long. I was now wondering how, but because we are in it together, I understand how things are going on for people now. So I don't know how this government wants to see it, because you don't wait until we die finish before you create a solution. So a sensitive government should have looked at it and say, okay, let me bring, because the major problem we are having now is just the price of fuel, PMS. And you saw it coming. You said you give us our refinery. We don't see refinery. You said you give us CNG. CNG is not there for us to take advantage of. So I don't know how they want us to actually go into it. And sometimes when we talk like this, as if we are talking government down, but it's a fact that it's glaring to everyone's face. We are all in it together. I can tell you that it's not only the poor that is even crying now. The rich are also crying. Do you know what? That money they place value on has also had issue because of the rise in dollar. So it becomes a serious problem. So I think there is an urgent need for our leaders to solve this problem. You could see what Babajide Sanwo-Olu is trying to do. That is a very cost approach. How? You are telling people not to come to work. Is that not going to have a negative effect on GDP? Because you are telling me not to come to work.
The productivity. Them to come to work 4 days.
4 days.
5
No.
days
If you are level 1 to 14, they are saying 2 days don't come to work. And if you are 14 to 17, don't come to work once. That means you are killing productivity. A place like Lagos, there's always happenings. An Okada man would have taken that person to work. A transporter would have taken that person to work. You are cutting a lot of people out of what they're supposed to get. It's a serious problem. So we have now reduced to that level that you now say, okay, even government, I can feel you are suffering. Stay at home. It's a very difficult thing to manage, even for governors.
Okay, just before we go, you have touched briefly on how Nigeria's current situation compares to that of other nations. You did mention Saudi Arabia. With Saudi Aramco, the people of Saudi Arabia hardly have challenges of this sort. So let us speak to lessons that Nigeria can learn, from countries such as Libya, Russia, Saudi Arabia, regarding how to manage, fuel pricing and cost of living issues generally, in 2 minutes.
Right. If you look at those people, they plan for future. We have discovered oil since the 60s, and up to now, about 80 years, we have not made any difference. Look at our refinery. 4, they have gone moribund. They are not even producing. So I think the best thing for us is that our refinery must. So because Dangote refinery cannot solve the Nigerian problem. It's a private entity. So we must make sure that we fix our refinery and plan for Nigeria. I think it's very key.
There's a saying that goes that he that fails to plan plans to fail, and it's important that as a nation we don't, just go, like they say, go haywire in the present, but also, plan properly for the future. I have been speaking with Dr. Aliyu Ilias, and he has spoken extensively to the current, cost of living rise that Nigerians are grappling with. The efforts we have seen by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, in the area of selling about 50 kg of rice at subsidized rate for Nigerians, which whoever is going to be benefiting from that will need their NIN identification to purchase these bags of rice. But thank you, Dr. Aliyu Ilias, for the insights you've shared today on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we'll be taking on today's edition of the program, but keep the conversation going across all the social media platforms, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and of course on Instagram. And let's have a conversation there. We will be at the back end to respond to your comment. My name is Chiamaka Enendu. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.